In Huddersgate, famed for its tram lines, up north where it's boring and slow, Stanley Bagshaw resides with his grandma at number 4, Prince Albert Row. One day, Stan was out in the backyard when the lady from next door said,
"Stan?
"Yes?"
Would you do me an errand? My gas fire's broke, and I've got to wait in for the man."
Stanley, being kind and obliging, said he could spare a moment or two. So Nellie began to explain to our Stan what she wanted the young lad to do.
"Now I want you to get me a pork pie, some cheese, and a large loaf of bread. Do you think you'll remember that, Stanley?"
Our Stanley just nodded his head.
"Now make sure you mind out for motors."
Stan promised he would take great care. And then he was off on his errand to the grocer's in Mafeking Square.
"Now take care. Meow."
Now, a pork pie, a loaf, and some red Leicester cheese were the things that our Stan had to get. So he made up a rhyme, which he said all the time to make sure he didn't forget. This is what old Nellie said, pork pie, cheese, and loaf of bread. This is what old Nellie needs, pork pie, loaf, and lump of cheese. This is what old Nellie says, mind out for motors, look both ways. Meanwhile, 2 robbers named Specs and Big Sidney were plotting a criminal plot.
"We'll stick up the jewellers in Mafeking Square and steal every diamond they've got."
"What if someone tries to stop us?"
said Specs. Sid pulled out his gun and just laughed.
"Is there anyone likely to argue with this? Is there anyone who'd be that daft?"
Our Stanley was outside the Roxy. He thought that he'd just take a peek at the posters displayed by the entrance that showed what was on there that week. The first film looked soppy and boring, but the one where it said, "Coming soon," showed how Ringo the Kid captured Mexico Pete in the gunfight at Martha's Saloon. Now Stanley liked those sort of pictures, where the men in white hats always won, and he imagined that he was Ringo the Kid, fighting duels in the wild western sun. It was high noon, time for the showdown. Stan knew just what he had to do. But as Mexico Pete said, "Go for your gun," a voice from behind said,
"Here, you."
Our Stanley woke up from his daydream, and the voice said,
"Here, you."
once again. When he turned round to see who was talking, he found 2 rather strange-looking men.
"We're looking for Carter's the jewellers. Think it's somewhere down this street."
Stan was staring at Big Sid and thinking, he looks just like Mexico Pete.
"What's up? Are you deaf?"
said Big Sidney.
"Speak up, or I'll give you what for."
Said Stan, It's down there in Mafeking Square, the shop with the bright yellow door."
"Yellow door. Right, let's go."
Sid revved up the motorbike engine, so he didn't hear Stan when he said, I think it's the shop with the bright yellow door. I'm not sure. Maybe it's red." Too late. They'd gone round the corner, and our Stan was just left standing there. So he set off once more on his errand to the grocer's in Mafeking Square. This is what old Nellie says, cheese, pork pie, and lump of bread. Here we are, I'm nearly there, the grocer's shop in Mafeking Square. The shop lady said, "Can I help you?" Our Stan was about to begin to say a pork pie when the door burst wide and Specs and Big Sidney barged in.
"Put your hands in the air. It's a stick-up. This here in my hand is a gun."
"Are you Mexico Pete, the bad bandit?" said Stan. Sid scowled and looked down and said,
"Son, if you don't shut your cake hole, I'll shoot you. I would, you know, wouldn't think twice. I eat boys like you for my afternoon tea.
Thought Stanley. That's not very nice. Then Specs threw a bag on the counter.
Fill that up with diamonds galore.
Said Miss Podmore, "We only sell groceries, dear. Try Carter's, the jeweller's next door." Whispered Big Sid.
You blockhead, we've blown it. Come on, make a getaway, quick.
Specs grabbed up the bag and made for the door, but Miss Podmore said, "Hang on a tick. I can do you a nice piece of Stilton, or some red Leicester, fresh in today." Said Stanley. "OK, Pete, go for your gun," said Big Sidney.
What did you say?
"It's time for the showdown," said Stanley.
This kid's gone bananas,
Thought Sid.
Just who do you think you are, Sunbeam?
Stan replied, "I am Ringo the Kid.
Who?
I am Ringo the Kid, the good cowboy. My six-gun is trusty and true. So do as I say, 'cause I'm not afraid of an ugly old fuzz-face like you."
What?
Leave him.
Said Specs. "Let's just scarp her." But Sid let out a kind of a hiss.
So, you think I'm just playing, is that it? Well, just cop a barrel of this.
The bullet whizzed past Stanley's ear-hole, ricocheted off a tin of baked beans, hit a bottle of sauce, tomato of course, which splattered all over Specs' jeans.
I'm bleeding.
Cried Specs,
Oh, you've shot me.
and fell to the floor as if dead. And the bag, which he'd flung in the air as he fell, hit Sid on the back of the head. "Good shot." Big Sid was thrown into confusion.
Someone slugged me.
He cried in dismay. Then, blundering about, trying to find the way out, he fell through the window display. Now, outside the shop, as it happened, was Police Sergeant Archibald Spear. When he saw something strange in the window, he said, "Now then, what have we got here? This looks like the face what belongs to a notorious robber named Sid. I think I shall go and arrest him." So he went in the shop, and he did. "I arrest you in the name of the law."
It's a fair cop.
When the sergeant had done the arresting, he said, "Now I must make my report. I have to write down everything what's been said and read it out loud in the court. Now, laddie, what do you remember? A few words from you, if you please." Stan thought for a bit, then said, "I know, that's it. Pork pie, loaf, and red Leicester cheese." While the shop lady made up Stan's order, the sergeant wrote Stanley's words down. "A pork pie, a loaf, and some red Leicester cheese." Then, being just a little bit puzzled, he turned to our Stan with a frown. "Would you care to elaborate further? This here's a bit vague, seems to me." "No, thank you," said Stanley. "I'll have to go now, or else I'll be late for me tea."
Have you had a nice time?
Said his grandma, when our Stan got back home for his tea. "I've just run an errand for Nellie, that's all. Nothing much ever happens to me."